All right, thank you all for joining us here today, and welcome to the Clinical Laboratory Management Association's Chapter Leaders Webinar Updates for 2018. My name is Erica Bruning, and I'm the Chapter and Membership Senior Associate for CLMA Headquarters. I'll be serving as today's moderator. Please note that the computer audio quality can vary by your internet connection. For the best audio quality possible, please use the dial-in phone number instead of your computer audio. Throughout the presentation, you can submit questions through the questions window on the webinar toolbar. We have time left at the end of today's presentation to address your questions. It is my privilege to now introduce today's panelists, Jane Hermanson, CLMA President, and Joe Keary, 2017 CLMA Chapter Advisor. With that, I'll let Jane take it away.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Erica, and you can turn it to the next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today is the chapter experience and a task force that we all had, that several of us had an opportunity to participate in. But I want to start out with a quote that I've heard a lot in business, and I think you've probably heard it too. If you've seen one, you've seen one. Have you ever heard people say that? And when I started getting involved with chapters, when I got involved as a CLMA member over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to participate in many different chapter events across the country. I've been a member of a program planning committee. I have been a speaker. I have been just a general participant. And I can honestly say, if you've seen one, you've seen one. And what we have heard from you, our chapter leaders, is that it's hard to do this work. And yes, it is hard. So as we've been listening over the years to our chapter leaders and our members, we as a board ask ourselves, how could CLMA improve the chapter experience, both for the volunteer leaders and for the CLMA members themselves, and ultimately improve the value of the chapters across the country? So we did establish a chapter task force. So what we're going to, I'll talk about the task force. Joe is going to review the chapter affiliation agreement and then the different resources that are available to you. So you can go to the next slide, Erica. So we formed a chapter task force, and we acknowledge that the chapter experience is incredibly important to our CLMA members, and it's a large part of the overall CLMA experience. And we wanted to make that experience, the chapter experience, as valuable as possible for our members. So we convened a chapter task force, and it had many members from the board of directors. We also had engaged CLMA members who had held leadership positions. Some of them were chapter members and chapter leaders, and some of them were non-chapter people, but they had been leaders on various CLMA committees. So you can go to the next slide, Erica. And we had the opportunity to meet in person for a full day in March 6th of 2017. And we had a meeting in Chicago. And the task force that the group worked with was this. And I'll read this slide to you because I think it's important. We were charged to examine the CLMA chapter model. And we were charged with looking specifically at the mission of CLMA and the purpose of a chapter. We were to identify best practices that came from different trade and professional associations. And remember that Smith Buckland, our management company, they do have the opportunity to work with over 100 professional associations, and many of them do have chapter and local activities. So it was very interesting to tap into their expertise. So we were to look at the best practices of these associations, including different models, to understand what's working with the chapters, because there are some really awesome things that are happening in the chapters, and then to understand what's not working in the chapters. We also wanted to look at what the CLMA membership requirements were and what the enforcement was for chapter participation for CLMA members. And I'm sure that some of you remember that we've actually had CLMA chapter members who were never even members of the association, and chapter leaders. So we wanted to make sure that we were developing value and making sure that the chapter experience is as strong as possible. So we had this charge, had about a dozen people together, and then the chapter task force was in charge of getting their findings given to the board of directors for discussion and approval no later than March 20th, 2017. So prior to that chapter task force convening, and Erica, you can go to the next slide, please. Prior to that, a survey was sent to all of you chapter leaders, and it was an open-ended, probably a 12-question survey, and you had the opportunity to provide just free text answers to that survey. And we had a lot of results, and remember what I said, when you've seen one, you've seen one. That is exactly how we got feedback back from each of the chapter members. So when we asked people, what do you see the mission of your CLMA chapter, it was not clear and it was not understood well to the CLMA chapters. And when you don't know what your mission is, it's really hard to define what success looks like. Some chapters were considered successful as per the chapter success standards, but there were truly no objective metrics beyond a lot of anecdotal experience or just the chapters within themselves comparing themselves to last year's standards. So what is the mission? We weren't quite sure. And we also found that there was not a lot of consistency as far as how the chapters were operating. And again, if you've seen one, you've seen one. What they do, how they do it, why they do it, when they do it, and there was not a lot of consistency. And we have found this especially with members who are involved in one CLMA chapter, move to another state, join a different chapter, and are rather shocked at the difference between them. The next thing is that we have found that there was not a lot of, chapters were not sure or very consistent in their relationship with the national organization. And I would refer to this as, is it the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog? And who is the group that should have responsibility or influence over the other? And that's because we as an international association have really not made it clear, nor have we invested to help the chapters be an integral part of the overall CLMA membership delivery system. And we need to make sure that the chapters understand and are kept abreast of larger association initiatives that happen at the international level. So we understand that there has been some uncertainty, and those are some real opportunities for us as an association at the leadership level to do a better job of that. We also found that, thank goodness, members value chapters. I figured they did, because I have found them to be just a tremendous amount of time. Members value the networking and the education that's accessible, and they like it in a convenient local manner because it's more affordable for them. But mostly what I hear is that those CLMA chapters, these are home. This is my family. There's a sense of belonging that comes with being part of the CLMA chapter. When I talk with people and they introduce themselves, they say, they give me their name, and the next thing that comes from them, it's not who they work for, it's which CLMA chapter they're a part of. This is part of your identity, and it's important to our CLMA members, for those who are involved in good, strong chapters. We also find that, let's see, I want to make sure I've got my notes all straight here. Give me a second, guys. But what we have found, because we've had chapters delivering value in different ways, we find although people value the opportunities, the value is delivered in different ways. And the chapters don't have a consistent value proposition. And as an example, some chapters may give financial breaks to their member attendees, but other chapters will give an all-comers approach, and the more the better. And what happens is that the membership status doesn't matter. And ultimately what that means is that you as members are subsidizing the activities for the non-members, because you look around, because you're paying for the benefit of those non-members being there. And ultimately what happens is that some of our members have said, well, why on earth am I paying money to participate when these other people are not paying money and they get to participate too? So it really erodes what the CLMA value is. We also realize that at the local level, you do have a lot of competition. You compete locally with ASCLS meetings. You compete locally with the AACC meetings. Sometimes you collaborate, but sometimes you compete. So how do you differentiate CLMA in the chapter? So we have found that to be a true challenge. And then lastly, the last bullet point on this slide I think is really important, because it's hard to run a chapter. And we are finding that our chapters are having a hard time recruiting and keeping volunteer leaders in place. They're cycling through chapter leaders, and you kind of laugh, you shrug your shoulders and say, yeah, it was my turn to be president again. And wouldn't it be nice if you had volunteers stepping up to be involved? So is it too much heavy lifting? And we found that it's really a challenge there. So finally, when we look at what these findings came through the survey, and considering the best practices aspect, I've been very lucky recently to have a lot of conversation with other association leaders, people who work with Smith-Buckland as their management group. And chapters take on a lot of different forms. There are definitely a lot of practices, a lot of different models and ways of doing chapters. And I would say that there aren't really any best chapters, but there are some better practices rather than worst practices. But I think that the practices need to be defined by the culture of the association and the industry and profession that association serves. So unfortunately, there is no magic wand that we can wave and say, hey, here's the best chapter mechanism. But it's up to us to define what that chapter model is based on our association's culture and our members. So that was the intent that we took into our task force activity when we had that full day session in March. Erica, you can go to the next slide. So the recommendations that came through the chapter task force was that we felt that there was a need to standardize the mission of the CLMA chapters and to align that mission with the International Association. And I will share that mission with you as soon as I'm finished with all of these. We also knew that we needed to review and revise what the mutual expectations were of CLMA and the local chapters. Again, remember, is it the dog wagging the tail, or is it the tail wagging the dog? So we wanted to make sure that everyone is clear with that and to ensure that the chapters are complying equally with those expectations. So to drive toward a very standardized process. And I think we as laboratory leaders, certainly we are used to standardization and making sure that we're following what those policies are. So we have created a new set of policies that Joe will be explaining in a bit. We also wanted to make sure that we are keeping education as a strict member benefit. Because if we are diluting CLMA value and allowing non-members to have this fantastic benefit, again, as I said before, our members have ended up subsidizing and paying for the benefits that non-members are receiving. And as an association, if our member benefit is so diluted, there's no value, we're going to continue to lose members, and we want to grow and we want to add more value. And then lastly, which is actually a rather simple task we feel, is to establish a uniform chapter dues so that it is the same for all members. And we found a lot of variability, and it would just make it a lot easier for you. So the next slide. And again, this is in order to prevent that if you've seen one, you've seen one. We don't want that chapter experience to feel like that or look like that. So in order to prevent that experience, I want to share with you what the mission of the CLMA chapters is. And the mission is this. The mission of the CLMA chapter is to foster networking, education, and a sense of belonging for CLMA members. Chapters are important. The member experience is important. And we want to make sure that that culture is spread across all of our chapters nationally. And Joe is going to talk about the mechanisms that we have in place in order to accomplish that. So thank you so much. Joe, it's up to you.
Thank you, Jane, and good morning or good afternoon as it be to all our chapter leaders. I'm Joe Keary. I'm your 2018 chapter advisor, and we're going to continue now with looking at some of the changes we are going to be looking toward for 2018. Next slide, please. We'll start with our chapter affiliation agreement for 2018. The first thing we did as a result of this task force was to align the affiliation agreement with the chapter mission that Jane has previously discussed. Now, you'll receive this new affiliation agreement during the November invoicing process for the 2018 Chapter Service Pack fee. This completed agreement will be due in conjunction with that Service Pack fee by December 31st, 2017, and that's a requirement, again, statutorily for maintaining chapter status with CLMA. Now, if you have specific questions related to the affiliation agreement, you can contact Erica. That is her email. She is our point of contact. She's our chapter relations associate at the executive office. And if you have other questions, she can reach out to me and we can get together and discuss it. Next slide, please. So let's look at the chapter affiliation agreement and see what's new. As Jane mentioned, one of the big key member value thrusts in this new document is that chapter educational events will be retained as a CLMA member only benefit. Now, before we start to be concerned, chapters can still hold two different types of events, chapter standalone events or joint meetings and conferences. And let's look at the difference between them. For standalone events, it will be an educational, it's classed as an educational event, which is only provided by that chapter without any co-partnership of any other organization. And that standalone event will be providing education. It is not a social event. So we're still encouraging social events in order to boost membership, but those would be events where educational offerings were not provided. The registration for these events will be open to CLMA members only, but chapters can use this as an innovative way to boost membership by providing membership in CLMA along with the registration for the event as an option for non-members who wish to attend. That way, if they register and purchase their membership at the same time, they're able to attend that event. It boosts the international membership, the chapter membership, and it maintains that member value emphasis for the education. Now, many of our chapters conduct joint meetings or conferences with other professional associations. So these chapter joint meeting conferences would be an educational event where you're in partnership with one or more other organizations. Again, it provides education, is not strictly a social event because this does not pertain to those. The registration is open to CLMA members and non-members because naturally those organizations, members do not have to become members of CLMA. But CEUs from CLMA will only be able to be provided to those who are members of the association. So we have the standalone, we have the joint meeting or conference, and again, these are educational events, not strictly social events. Next slide, please. The chapter affiliation agreement, the next thing, will standardize the chapter legal affiliations. As a member of the CLMA family, utilizing the name and the reputation of CLMA, chapters need to maintain this affiliation legally so that they can, it's a sort of a branding agreement in order to use the name CLMA. As Jane mentioned, we're going to standardize chapter dues. So all chapter dues beginning January 2018 will be at a standard rate of $20 for all chapters who currently charge or who wish to charge annual chapter member dues. Chapters are not required to charge chapter member dues, but since we're now restricting educational events to those who are members, and a number of chapters do use educational events as a way to build their coffers for, say, scholarships or grants to attend Knowledge Lab or other events. By implementing a chapter dues, it will provide a rebate or a cash flow back to the chapter so that they can use those funds for the betterment of their members and, again, increasing member value. Chapter bylaws, which should be reviewed on a periodic basis just as any set of bylaws, will now follow a standard amendment period. And that period will run from October 1st to December 31st of each year. So as part of preparing for your next year, your chapter planning, your strategic planning, it'll afford chapters the opportunity to standardize their review of their bylaws, make any necessary amendments, pass them through their governance process, and then provide the uploaded current bylaws to the executive office for filing by December 31st for each year. Next slide. So we've just discussed a number of the requirements and a number of changes we're facing, but what resources are we giving you, chapter leaders, to help make your life easier? Let's go through some of those resources. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, I'm your chapter advisor, and I will be the advisor to you regarding questions or concerns on the new chapter affiliation agreement, the service pack fee, or alignment, dissolution, recruitment, and expansion of chapter membership. As you know, during this past year, we've had a few chapters realign, forming local programming committees, and there are a number of innovative ways to keep CLMA participation robust while reducing that governance burden on certain areas. So I'll be that advisor for you. And you always have your CCL chair, Jan Williams-Martinez, who's an additional advisory resource to you as your CCL chair. She exists as your board liaison between the chapter leaders and the board, and she oversees that CCL steering committee, which works for you in representing your concerns and your issues to the board of directors. So either of us, as well as Erica, are they're the volunteer leaders, and Erica is our staff member who provides that support to you. And please, I'm sincere when I say this, reach out to us if you have concerns. Make sure your concerns and questions are clear in your mind before you take this back to your board and to your membership so that we can speak with one united voice as an organization and make sure that the clarity and the transparency is evident to each of our members. And we'll have a question and answer period later for this. Next slide. This is Erica. She's available again during business hours to regard questions about chapters. You have her chapter affiliation. You do have her email. She can answer questions on the service pack fee, and she's your headquarters, executive office point of contact to serve you as chapter leaders and works with the other members of the staff team, the team that works on membership, the team that works on the finances, Knowledge Lab, etc., to ensure that we have a cohesive chapter implementation of the chapter mission across the organization. That's her email there. As mentioned here, the webinar and follow-up materials will be uploaded to the chapter leader file library. I encourage each of you to share that with all the members of the leadership team of your individual chapters. And they'll also be placed in this October's chapter leader link, which again, I strongly encourage you to refer to. And next slide, and probably my favorite slide of all, is a reminder, a save the date for the CCL Summit at Knowledge Lab 2018. This year's summit will be held on Saturday, May 5th from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. at the Long Beach Convention Center in Long Beach, California. And I know the Knowledge Lab Committee is reaching out now to those individuals who will be speakers and presenters, and I can promise you you'll have an exciting CCL Summit and an even more exciting Knowledge Lab 2018. We've seen each year over the past couple of years, the attendance is rising, the quality of the presenters is rising, and the participation by the CCL, the leaders of our chapters in the CCL Summit, is increasing each year. So I personally am looking forward to this, and I hope to see you all in Long Beach in May. And I'm going to turn it back over to Erica. Thank you very much, and we'll wait for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Jane and Joe. We will now open it up here to questions. I see that many of you have used the question box here and have some great questions to start an awesome conversation here between all of us. One that I'd like to personally address before we get started, I know many of you have asked about the availability of these slides at the end of our webinar. To answer your question, yes, these slides will be available in a PDF format. There's going to be some post-webinar communication that will be headed out to all of you within about an hour or so from our webinar here today. that will also include a recording of this webinar. So you will have all this information available to you to discuss with your other chapter leaders as well. Now, one question that we did get through our chat box here deals with chapter dues. And this particular person is wondering, they are with a chapter that currently charges $10 for chapter dues and has some questions about the increase to $20, where that came from, and what the benefit will be on the membership in the chapter with that increase. Joe, do you want to take this question?
Certainly. Again, this pertains to chapters that either currently charge or plan to. We felt as a task force that standardizing that, which is a fairly common industry practice, enables members moving from one chapter to another to have a consistent expense planning, particularly if they're able to submit this to their employer, but even for their own budget. It shows a consistency and it provides a standard revenue stream for each of the chapters. If you don't charge dues, it will not require you to do so, but we want to make that standard so that, again, consistency across our great organization. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Joe. Joe, while I have you, we also have some more questions regarding the educational chapter events now becoming a CLMA member-only benefit. Could you speak to a bit more here what the rules will be regarding this new member benefit, when these will take effect, and speak a bit more about this policy as well?
Okay, great. Again, the key in our profession and our industry right now in healthcare in general is value. What value do we bring? And one of the ultimate, if you look at the mission of the CLMA chapter, is to provide foster networking, education, and sense of belonging. So by standardizing the fact that to attend a CLMA educational event, you must be a member, it establishes, again, value of membership. Now, we do realize that many of these of your individual chapters I've already planned activities which reach into the first quarter at least of calendar year 2018. If you have an event planned and you've already planned and advertised, etc., we encourage you to reach out to myself and Erica, and we'll discuss these on a case-by-case basis. Again, we don't want to become draconian. We realize this is a change in direction, but as they say in the nautical world, a ship changes, but it takes quite a while to turn it around. So we're not expecting this to be an immediate, effective January 1st. That's the absolute rule, because chapters may have already made their planning, promoted their function, etc. And we definitely do not want to appear to non-members as being inflexible and not wanting to get them to become members. So reach out to Erica and myself, please. If you have a case-by-case basis, we'll look at those. We'll work them out as a collegial team that we are, and we'll come up with an answer, at least for the beginning part of 2018. But this gives us a direction. We have our compass, we have our azimuth, we know where we're going. So we can make individual changes, or at least individual accommodations before that.
Great, thank you, Joe. I see here too in our chat box that we are getting questions about the affiliation agreement itself, the document, and I'm sure all of you would like to see it. It is going to be made available to you November. So in November of this year, we will be sending it out to all of you, and it'll be in conjunction with the invoicing process for the chapter service pack fee. So you do have all the changes outlined here in your slides, and again, we will have the slides available to you, but we will send the actual document to you beginning of November.
It's just like waiting for Game of Thrones. You got to wait. The anticipation.
And hi, everybody. This is Jane Hermanson. So I'm guessing some of you are probably wondering where Jan Williams Martinez is, and I just got an email from her. She sends her regrets. She was going to be participating in this call, but she's been waiting, just like waiting for Game of Thrones. She was waiting for CAP to come and inspect, and guess what? They walked in today. So that is why Jan's not able to join us, so she does apologize for that.
Send our best wishes to her. I'm sure she'll do great.
Great. Another question I have for the group here. It is about the $20 fee increase. We have some chapter leaders on the line who are concerned that this fee increase might be something that might discourage not only chapter renewals, but membership renewals. Jane or Joe, could either of you just speak to the benefit of increasing that price and also speak to some of the concerns that we have here today?
Yes, again, it's how we market it. If the increase is seen by members as simply a way to raise the treasury and to build large amounts of money in our treasury, or have it flow to they feel it's flowing to the executive office or another site, they may feel resentful. But again, as chapter leaders, it's our stewardship of the funds. If you can point out to them that, yes, we're collecting $20 as the chapter, but this is what we do with it. We provide scholarships to promote either leader training for our current members, a scholarship to MLS students to encourage them to join the profession. We provide partial or full scholarships to Knowledge Lab. What do you do with the money? The amount of money, I do not believe, is significant as long as the member sees the value of contributing that, and that is being used appropriately, and that good stewardship is being applied to it. And again, it goes back to the word value. If they see that $20 is establishing value for themselves or a fellow member, I think they'll be able to accept it a lot more clearly than if they simply just see the number has risen. I mean, when we purchase something, even in our professional or our personal lives, prices go up, but we want to see a commensurate increase in the value we're getting for that price. So it's the task of the chapter leaders, assisted by myself, Erica, the rest of the board, the executive team, to help give you that messaging to promote the term value, and I can't overuse that. Jane, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, so I'll just echo that, Joe. I think that I heard it defined really, really well by someone who said value is something that you're willing to pay for. So if they're willing to pay $20, then it's incumbent on all of us as an association to make sure that the value realized at the chapter level is worth that $20 to them.
And I'll add here too as well, from a logistics standpoint, this is a number that was chosen because it was the average price across all amounts for chapter dues currently. So, this wasn't a number that we picked arbitrarily. This was a number that was carefully studied by taking an average of all of the current chapter dues that members are charged. And it was also a number that was brought through the task force and analyzed and reviewed as well. Okay, we do have another question here. We have someone who's asking about when all this information will be updated on all of the chapter leader resources and online, so that it's easily accessible. Again, we have all this information available. After our webinar today, everything will be made available to all of the chapter leaders. So just hang tight here till the end of our webinar, and then we'll begin to post all of that online. All right. And I think that is currently it for our questions. I did see quite a few come through here today with questions specific to events that you might have at your local chapter level. I'd ask that you'd reach out to me directly through email, and I'm happy to speak with you about those specific scenarios pertaining to your events in your chapter, and we can make sure that we find a solution that's going to work well for your chapter. But with that, I want to thank you all so much today for joining us here for this call, and thank you especially to Jane and Joe for presenting today's material. Again, if you do have any other questions or concerns, please reach out to me via email or give our executive office a call.
See you all in Long Beach.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.